At my father's funeral, my brother demanded all the inheritance because he's the biological son, and I'm just my mom's child from a previous marriage. I said, 0K, I have renounced it, but never contact me for the rest of your life no matter what. He smirked and said, like I ever would. 3 months later, the inheritance is all mine. Dad would definitely be happier if his son would inherit it, instead of some woman who's not related by blood. You're not my sister anymore, I'm cutting ties with you, my brother said with a sneering smile. Indeed, to our father. I was not related by blood, as I was my mother's child from a previous relationship. Still, he loved me as his own daughter, which made him very special to me. I felt angry that my brother wanted to monopolize everything our father left. But I was relieved by his words about cutting ties. Fine by me. In return, once you inherit, don't ever contact me again. Like I'd ever do that. Don't expect any money from me later, not even a penny. I am Kelly, a 29-year-old civil servant. My brother Steve is 22 and just graduated from university this year. He often brags about his company being more famous and successful than the rural city office where I work. Must be Dad's genes, right? I've got the blood of a dad who worked for a major corporation. Yeah, very impressive. Steve often brings up the matter of inheriting our father's traits. Although we share the same mother, we have different fathers. Steve is the child of our current father and mother, while I am the child of my mother and her ex-husband. Although I'm technically a stepchild, Dad never despised me for it and cared for me deeply. I don't really remember my real father much, as he ran away with his affair partner when I was little. Thus, I regard my current dad as my true father. When Steve was younger, he never mentioned that I was a stepchild, or that we had a different father. However, when I was an adult and he was still in middle school, our mother died in a car accident. Unable to cope without blaming someone, Steve convinced himself that it was my fault. At the funeral, he cried out, "Why did Mom have to die? It would have been better if it were you." No one would be troubled if the step-sibling were gone, no matter how shocked he was. Being told such things made me lose any affection I had for my brother. I wanted to argue back at such a harsh statement, but our father, who I had never seen so angry, scolded Steve fiercely, so I chose to remain silent. Naturally, my relationship with Steve deteriorated. Initially, he tried to surpass me academically but aiming too high. He failed to get into his first-choice schools for both high school and university. He couldn't out-earn me either, as I was a full-time employee, and he was just a student part-time worker. There were plenty of other fields like sports or arts where he could have competed. But fearing failure, he stopped taking any challenges. As blood relation was an undeniable fact, he thought he could dominate by poking at that without any need for effort. Eventually, Steve just kept mocking me for being a stepchild, and not the real child of our father. It was probably just misplaced anger from losing our mother at first. But as he grew up, he genuinely started to believe. Dad and I are the real family, and the sister is an outsider, as my sister is a stepchild. I have a higher standing than her. I grew tired of dealing with such a selfish brother. He would provoke unilaterally, lose by his own measures, and get angry. I got so exhausted dealing with him that I started to dismiss him carelessly. When Steve chose to commute to university from home, I moved out to live alone in an apartment. When I would come back home, I made sure to coordinate with Dad to visit when Steve wasn't around. 4 years later, Steve graduated from university and managed to get a job at a fairly renowned local company. I had prepared a tie as a graduation gift. Of course, I got a job at a much better and more famous company than the city office where you work as a civil servant, because I have the blood of a dad who works for a major corporation. His character apparently hadn't changed even in 4 years at university. I decided against giving him the gift. I continued to live alone and commute to work, while he lived with our father, and faced the rough waves of society as a new working adult. That lifestyle didn't last even a year before Dad suddenly fell ill. There were no signs when we talked on the phone the night before. He passed away so suddenly that I didn't even have time to say goodbye. At the funeral, I served as the chief mourner. And thanks to Dad's prior arrangements about what was needed, and which procedures to follow, everything except the inheritance was smoothly handled. The problem was the inheritance. The only living inheritors were Steve and me. I had a feeling that discussing it would inevitably lead to conflict. I found some documents about the inheritance in Dad's room, but I knew they wouldn't be followed exactly. Steve arrived over 30 minutes late for our meeting without apologizing, and immediately said something outrageous. The inheritance? I'm the real child, so I'll take it all. You, as a stepchild, are just an outsider. Isn't it greedy for an outsider to claim the inheritance? Steve kept laughing about being the real child and monopolizing the inheritance. I was so tired of dealing with him all my life that I put forward a condition and promised to renounce the inheritance. I won't inherit anything from Dad. In return, you must never contact me for the rest of your life, no matter what. Are you stupid? Like I'd ever contact you. Don't expect anything from me later, just disappear. Disgusted, I stood up to leave while Steve just kept smirking. I fondly remembered how cute he was as a child as I left. The next day, I went to a law office to proceed with the legal aspects of the renunciation of inheritance. Kelly, you said you don't have any inheritance rights as you are a stepchild of your father. Actually, Dad formally adopted me, so I do have rights to inherit his property. But I don't want anything anymore. I'll renounce the inheritance. The lawyer's acknowledgement came as I interrupted him. Although I hadn't mentioned it to Steve, Dad had officially adopted me after marrying my mother. Therefore, even though we weren't blood related, we truly were parent and child. I was aware of everything Dad owned from the estate investigation, yet I wanted to be free from the complications of being called a stepchild or a legitimate child, so I had chosen to give up everything. A month later, the lawyer informed me that the family court had accepted my renunciation of the inheritance. Reluctantly, I contacted Steve. Hello? My renunciation of the inheritance is complete. You know, from the estate investigation Dad had? Steve cut me off, shouting, "Shut up! I get it that you've renounced the inheritance. Stop acting like a real sister and don't ever contact me again." He hung up, and I sighed deeply. Knowing that Steve would eventually come crying made me feel even worse. 3 months passed, and then I started receiving numerous calls and emails from Steve. Reluctantly, I answered the phone, hearing his exhausted voice. You know what? I need to borrow some money. Dad had debts, and I can't keep up with the repayments. I used Dad's savings too, but it's not enough. What? Sure, Dad had some loans to repay, but if you used all his savings for it, it shouldn't have been this bad. When I responded that way, Steve yelled back, "Did you know about this? Did you push the debt onto me knowing all this? You have such a bad personality." "Oh right. Because you're just a stepchild. You must be jealous of me, the legitimate child. Who hung up the phone when I tried to tell you? Who blocked my calls? I thought I'd email you out of pity though. And yet you unblocked me when you got into trouble? Who's really the one with the bad personality here?" I had learned about Dad's financial situation, including his significant debts, as part of my renunciation process handled by the lawyer. I had tried to inform Steve, but he had cut off all communication, so I left it at that. As expected, he ended up coming to me in tears. Sure, Dad worked for a big company. But can you imagine how hard it was to send you to high school and college? There were educational insurance and Mom's life insurance. But things like the house and car had to be paid with loans. I'm not your sister, right? You should talk to the mortgage lender or the lawyer instead of me, an outsider. What are you talking about? Don't sweat the small stuff. Besides, I'm treating you like a sister even though you're just a stepchild, so be happy about it. Come on, Kelly, give me some money. Furious at his smug voice, I hung up sharply and blocked Steve's number. He didn't know where I lived alone, and I hadn't left any clues about my home at Steve's house. Just to be safe. I even got a new cell phone, thinking that would stop his calls, but I was wrong. Kelly, please, I need money, otherwise, I can't survive. Steve started showing up at the city office where I work. Unlike when he acted arrogantly towards me, he now appeared genuinely distressed, visiting me repeatedly. He only came during lunch breaks, which seemed to indicate he was sneaking out from his job. On days he didn't visit, he would still call multiple times, disrupting my work. I explained the situation to my boss, and they moved me to an administrative position. But then he began staying past closing hours, refusing to leave until he saw me. After work, I caught him waiting for me and dragged him to the parking lot. "Stop it already. Don't cause trouble at my workplace. I told you to consult the loan institutions and the lawyer." He finally stopped pretending to be polite and looked down at me with arms crossed, anger in his voice. "I already consulted them, okay? The insurance from the group credit life policy means I don't have to pay for the house anymore. The car's left with about $5,000, so I negotiated to reduce the monthly repayment and keep using it. Then you're not really struggling to live. Dad only had those 2 loans. What are you begging for money for?" His anger softened suddenly, and he looked around nervously. When I pressed him further, he reluctantly began to speak. "Actually, Dad had quite a bit of savings, so I spent it on various things and went over budget. I borrowed money from a friend, but now I can't pay it back. That guy's going around saying I scammed him, so now I can't borrow from anyone else. If I can't borrow from friends, I'll have to go to predatory lenders. Then I'll have to repay with borrowed money, and I can't make ends meet. My head ached deeply as I sighed. His story was convoluted, but I understood the mess he was in. You mean you keep borrowing money to repay debts and now you're stuck? Yeah, that's it. I think I'm already on the blacklist or something. I can't borrow anymore. If you pay, it'll all be over. Steve said, extending his hand towards me. So Kelly, give me $8,000 when I slapped his hand away. Steve rubbed his hand and glared at me angrily. There's no way I'm paying. It's entirely your fault for overspending on your shopping and resorting to loan sharks. Why can't you help me out when I'm asking like this? Is it because we're only half-blood related that you don't care about your brother? Stepchildren are really the worst, so unpleasant. I got into my car and started the engine. Steve tried to cling to me in desperation, but I knocked his hand away. You promised not to contact me for the rest of your life in exchange for monopolizing the inheritance. You break promises, beg for money. And on top of that, you're rude and foolish. I don't have a single penny for you. If you come again, I'll call the police. Steve repeatedly called out to me, Kelly, but I ignored him. I stepped on the accelerator, leaving him in the parking lot, and drove away. After that, Steve continued to come to the city hall, lingering until closing time, and bothering people from various departments with his calls in the morning and evening. Thanks to this, he became one of the top problematic individuals at the city hall. As long as I was there, he was a nuisance. Since he didn't shout or cause a scene at the counter, it was difficult to report him. So it was quicker for me to disappear. Do you want Kelly? She's no longer at this city hall. What? Did she quit? So how much severance pay did she get? When Steve came to the counter as usual, he learned from the staff that I had quit and received the severance pay. And he frantically started looking for where I might be. However, as personal information such as addresses and contact details of staff members is protected, there was no way he could be told freely. Unable to find me, Steve wandered around suspiciously, and was reported as a suspicious person here and there. Subsequently, he was unable to gather the money by the repayment deadline, and is now repaying little by little each month with considerable late fees added. I heard this from a kid whom Steve had defaulted on. It seems that he is ultimately facing wage garnishment as he couldn't keep up with repayments to other companies. Now he is forced to live modestly, a far cry from the arrogant brother who used to strut around. As for me, I didn't actually quit the city hall. The city where I work was formed by merging several towns. So the old town hall still functions as a branch office. I explained the situation to the personnel department, and was transferred to a branch in the mountains until things settled down. Initially, I planned to return to my former department once my brother's issue was resolved, but now I find the work in this branch more fulfilling. The mountain area has fewer residents, and is always short-staffed. Being closer to the residents here, I feel I am more helpful to them. When I say I have no family left, everyone treats me kindly. The sadness of losing both my father and mother never fully disappears. But at least I am relieved to be free from the complications of being labeled a legitimate child or a stepchild.